Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Welcome back to another episode of the Shrimp Tank, coming to you virtually from Seattle, the Pacific Northwest, and again, we are up north in Canada. Listen, if you want to learn how to start, grow, or run a successful business, this right here, it's a podcast for you. It's where we say street smarts and book smarts collide. Hello again, everyone. I'm Dan Whedon, and my co-host today is Phil Simchich. Our guest today is Philip Topham. This could get very, very chaotic, but I'll try to keep it all together. Philip is an entrepreneur, coach, author, patented inventor, and host of the Savvy Founder podcast. Philip's passion is to help business owners and founders shorten their journey. He's particularly good at helping leaders to develop their personal capacity to build and grow their business. With more than 25 years across startups and corporate roles, Philip has been everything from the janitor to CTO, CIO, to the founder and chief everything officer. He's solved problems others said couldn't be solved. Philip, we may have to help you. You may have to help Phil and I with problems. We'll find out, and we'll be with you shortly. Listen, everybody, you can find us on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and YouTube. We are ubiquitous. We come to you from a whole bunch of cities, including the mothership in Atlanta, Boston, Boca Raton, Charleston, Dallas, Knoxville, and soon to be New York. Now, before we bring Philip on, let's do some talking with Phil. Phil, how are you doing?
All right, Dan, I'm great. How are you? Excellent to be here. Really excited about talking with Philip about startups and all sorts of fun things. So
we're probably going to get our tech on a little bit too. So, I think and Philip probably doesn't, that I coach high school golf, and we are at the point in the season where we're past the regular season and we're getting into districts and heading to state next week. And I realized in watching the golfers during not only my players, but other players as well, as the stakes got higher, right? The pressure mounted, and all of a sudden, scores were higher than what we had seen over the course of time. That's interesting. The skills are all the same, but it's that little 5-inch course between our ears that's full of pressure that all of a sudden you got more people watching you. There's more scrutiny. There's the ability to advance or not advance. And I actually think about managing expectations as part of this. We're going to talk about entrepreneurship. You're an entrepreneur, Phil. You work with them. Give me your thoughts. I mean, I know how golfers respond to pressure. Some are really good. Some have to develop into it. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think pressure and entrepreneurship is like?
Well, in my younger days, I used to referee hockey, and upon occasion, I'd need a police escort out of the building, but that was a different kind of pressure. I grew up in a family business, and my mom and dad and my aunt and uncle bought a business back when interest rates were 23% per year. The business only operated full-time 2 months of the year and was weather dependent. So some people say pressure is a privilege or pressure is something you put on yourself, but there's a lot of external and economic pressure that entrepreneurs go through and always have. And so looking forward to what Philip's going to say about pressure and his 4-letter word, which is sort of one of the antidotes to pressure. But it's there, and people need to be able to perform in that pressure, or they're not cut out to be entrepreneurs, I think.
So this probably a great segue to bring on Philip. Boy, this is going to be a tongue twister for me today between Philip and Phil. At least you're not both Phils. Then nobody'd know who's talking next. But Philip, I'd like first of all, welcome, and I'd like to bring you into this conversation. Your bio was interesting. You've been everything from the janitor to the chief everything officer, and my guess is there's a little bit different pressures between being the janitor and the chief everything officer and everything in between, maybe. Talk to us a little bit about what you've experienced in your career and your own experiences around entrepreneurship with pressure.
Boy, thank you. Great to be here. And when I talk about pressure, boy, so many things go through my mind. I had a career, part of my career was as a chief information officer. One of the things, you are responsible for the entire computer for the entire company. And so imagine you're crawling behind the computer system and you trip over a wire. And that wire just happens to turn off the computers for the entire company. 2,000 people. Boom. Wow. Talk about pressure. You think you're going to have a job in the morning? So you learn in that kind of role with computers and technology and things like that. I learned very early on, the sun always rises tomorrow. Always does, and no matter how bleak it is.
That was a hypothetical story you're telling us, right?
No, actually not. No, it was not quite. It was not hypothetical. It was not quite a wire, but it was a switch I threw that did turn off the computers, and it took about 4 hours to get it fixed.
So some people were probably saying 4-letter words on that day. And I watched your blog number 51, I think, where you're talking about every entrepreneur needs to know this 4-letter word. So would you please share with us what that 4-letter word is and why it's important?
I've forgotten my 4-letter word.
Oh, well, that was a risk I took.
Oh, the risk. That's right. The risk. So that's the pressure, under pressure, right?
Yeah,
that's what's phenomenal about it, is when you're under pressure, your mind does phenomenal things, your own thing. And risk is that 4-letter word that I talk about for entrepreneurs. Every entrepreneur that I talk to, especially the high tech, high growth that I deal with, the first thing out of their mouth is, I need money to grow my business. And that's all comes down to how they think about risk when they're selling their business, building their business. They're trying to manage their risk. I'll give an example of that. Sometimes when people are looking for, when they're pitching their business, they say, here's my business, and they talk about their product and their idea. And what the investor always wants to know is, how do I make money? And how are you the great team that's going to make me money? And where are the business failures? Where's the risks? And how are you managing the risks? And are you better than the stock market, which is risky? So that's really where risk really comes in all the time, just everything you do.
You know, Philip, I have to think, I mean, I believe you're somewhere in the Silicon Valley, I think. Is that correct? Or where are you located? I probably should know this, but you came to us from my brother-in-law, Matt, late. And I don't know, I know you're in California.
I'm in Southern California. I'm in the city of Tustin in Orange County, 12 miles from Disneyland.
Okay, perfect. And we're up I-5 a little bit in Seattle, and there's a whole bunch of tech stuff that happens between Seattle and LA. Would you agree?
There's, from the Mexican border to the Canadian border and beyond, there's a lot that happens in tech.
There's got to be some perception, maybe it's a myth, that, hey, if I'm smart enough to come up with something that is really tech cool, I'm gonna go to lunch with somebody in Silicon Valley or Seattle or LA or someplace. They're gonna love it. I'm gonna be a genius and I'm gonna be filthy rich before I know it. That probably is about as far from the case as anything. Am I right?
Well, yeah. I mean, just go to a coffee shop and you read it in the next big book that somebody publishes. You know, for every single rule or rule of thumb, there's an exception out there, right? Somebody can go into a coffee shop and they can walk away with a $5 million check. The thing is it's like a story. A story has two sides, except I think of a story like a donut or a bagel. There's two sides to a donut or a bagel, but there's always a hole in the middle. So when you hear about the person that got a $5 million check, look at the facts. They probably were the right color. They were right social prestige. They had the right connections. A lot of things already happened prior to that meeting ever happening. Somebody vouched for them and said, this is the greatest thing. You better get in on this deal or not. And so it is, possible, but it is a whole lot of work to go into that, what is a two-minute meeting. And everybody else thinks that, oh, I just go up to Silicon Valley, I pull out my laptop, I sit in a nice coffee shop next to somebody, and I start talking about my business, and I walk away with a huge check, right? Because that's what happened with the start of Google. But that's not what they did. They went to Stanford. They knew the professors. The professors talked to them and talked to all the other investors and said, this is a great thing. They've got a great idea. And next thing, they had money. But there was a lot went into it, not just a coffee shop conversation.
So you mentioned the word team earlier. And so I understand your concept of team, meaning the founders. And so our audience is a lot of entrepreneurs, sometimes husband and wives or business partners. Tell us why the concept of team at the founder level is important.
Oh boy. So team for me is the entirety of all the ecosystems one operates in. And so there's a gazillion teams within that. There's the executive team, the founders, that team. And the biggest areas in startups is that founder misalignment and founder conflicts is the number one. You can look up just about any survey, and it's the biggest, issue. Misalignment. Three people start a business, they'll split it three ways, and suddenly one person has a medical issue or a life issue, and they can't participate. And then, of course, the others go on to build a business, and then suddenly the one that wasn't working, everybody's upset. You're getting third of the business and you didn't work. What's going on? And then the whole deal falls apart. So that's one kind of team. But I also think of what about customers, right? Customers are on your team. They're part of who drives your business. And if you're not thinking of them as part of your team, you're missing out on an opportunity. Even your vendors and key partners, they're part of your team. So oftentimes we think of customer as who pays you. And that's different than your team. I think of the customer as every single stakeholder, and they're different people on your team. And you have to figure out how to communicate to them, because it's a team sport to get a business going.
Awesome. And so when there's two founders or more interacting on the business, how important is it for them to actually share the highest level, almost co-CEO, so they both understand what's running in the business? Or is it more common and better that they both just go and do their own things?
So I'm going to give Sergey a shout out for this, and I can never pronounce his last name, so I'm not going to even try. But imagine you have two founders and think of that as a circle. You have a couple of situations. Both co-founders can be completely different. One's the sales marketing expert, and the other person is the operations technical expert, and they have no notion of the other person's job. Real problem, because there's no basis for them to communicate. The other situation is you could have both co-founders or both principals, and I'm using two, but you could have three or four. They know exactly the same thing. Well, then you have two engineers, or you have two marketing people, or two finance people, and there's no diversity of the business. So you want founders that have enough overlap that they have a complete appreciation for the skills that the other person has. They know they have their strengths, they know there's a weakness, and the other person is backing up their weakness. And that creates a really complementary team and an awareness. So that's how I look at that team dynamics and that sharing and stuff.
Boy, as someone who's coached teams in the past, it sounds like everybody needs to know their role, and each of those roles fills an important position is what it sounds like, right?
Yes, the the short answer is yes. But even beyond roles, it's that mysterious word called culture, and how you deal with conflict, how you deal with identifying risks. Can you say, hey, we got a risk, let's sit down and figure it out? That's really important for the founders and the business and employees and everybody to know what to work on.
Well, we have some teams that we have players in our team too, and right now we're going to learn about one of them. We're going to take a short break to hear from today's spotlight sponsor, and when we come back with our guest Philip Topham for our hot or not section of the show, we're going to ask Philip about family and friends. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Would you like to grow your business, increase revenues, and raise profits? Would more financing from your banker help you grow? Who is guiding your succession plan? Would you like more control over your business so you can sleep better at night? SME Business Wealth Builder works with business leaders and owners like you to help them grow their business and build their business wealth. For more information and to check out free resources, go to SMEwealthbuilder.com.
All right, welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm Phil Simchich, and our guest today is Philip Topham for our next segment, Hot or Not.
Before we go to hot or not, Phil, I just realized something with the whole Phil and Philip. I think our last show together, you had Dan and Dan, didn't you? So this might be this might be payback. Hey, Philip. Phil and I are going to pepper you with questions and ask you to tell us whether you think the topic that we raise is hot or not, and then why or why not. And at the end, you win absolutely nothing, but we hope you have some fun with it along the way. So my first one, I brought up family and friends. So hot or not, Philip, asking family and friends for startup funding?
It's for most companies, it's an absolute necessity to validate that you can move forward, but it has to be done. It's a good topic. It's a good thing to do, but it has to be done with integrity, honesty, and letting people know the risk. Just taking the money, yeah.
Well, and I just want to let Phil know that I had a follow-up, and I think that I love the answer. I want to dig maybe just a tad bit deeper. What are, in your experience, have you seen what's missing when you got a family and friends helping? They say, yeah, we want to help. We believe in you. We're going to give you some funding. I say, great. I want your funding. I appreciate your support. What's missing? What is the most common one or maybe two things that get missing in that process?
One or two. The top thing that comes to my mind is not being honest that friend and family is an investor, and that you have a responsibility to treat them like an investor, not like a family member. And that's really super important in getting those roles. Otherwise, it's like founder issues. It's almost as bad as founder issues, because they lead to missed lines and it become family issues. And that's worse than founder issues, because you have your family for life. You don't want to lose them. Founder issues, not quite as serious usually.
So for startups, do they need a real formal business plan, or do they just need a pitch deck?
That's a great question, and it's something that's very common. I'm going to share a story of somebody who. What is a pitch deck? First off, a pitch deck is your business plan presented to an investor on how your business makes them money. And I had a client that had built a perfect pitch deck, and they had said how they were going to make money for an investor, but then they had scheduled a meeting with a large financial institution. and presented their pitch deck. The problem is they were trying to get a product sale. At the end of the meeting, all these vice presidents stood up and goes, "That was great. It's interesting. We'll be back in touch." One vice president stood up and says, "Hey, here's my card. Call me. I'd like to invest." And they didn't understand that they were using a investor pitch deck to try to win sales. So pitch decks have to be tailored to the audience. It's really one of the key things.
All right. I got another hot or not for you here, Philip. Hot or not, nomad techs.
Nomad text.
Nomads.
Nomad.
Yeah,
Nomads.
yeah. No, it's not you mad, bro. Yeah, it's mad, bro. It's a nomad. I think we picked this up from some of the things you've written about. So maybe you can tell us what a nomad tech is and if it's hot or not.
Yeah, so it is hot. The COVID has shown the entire world that you can be a digital nomad, that you can do work from any place that you have generally internet connection, high speed. You can connect with the world and be part of that. And so it's an absolute trend. Companies are getting rid of their offices and their workspace and letting people work 3 days a week. It's no longer a option. All companies, the larger companies, have to definitely offer it as an option to the workforce. Otherwise, they're not competing to get talent. And I think even in the smaller businesses are having to figure out what is their people that have to be at work or can be digitally nomads. My son is actually a digital nomad. He not quite a digital nomad. He's not a nomad, but he does work remotely, and he's a lawyer. So completely hundreds of miles away from his clients, and it works because COVID was a great crisis that taught us we don't have to be in the same room to get work done.
So Philip, is it true or false for tech startups? Is their number one exit to be acquired by a bigger tech company so they get their liquidity big check?
False. So everybody that starts a tech business or any business is begin with the end in mind. So once you know what your end is, then you can aim for it. You don't need to start with, I'm going to have an IPO, an initial public offering, and go to stock to be successful. There's many ways beyond that you can say, hey, I need that million lifestyle business, and that's fine. You might not need it. You might not attract investors that way. You might only attract your friends and family, but not an institutional investor. So yeah, you choose what you want to build and then build towards it. And that's your success. Nobody else has to define your own success.
Speaking of your own success, let's talk about you and your own success. For those watching on YouTube, they'll see that your background says a savvy founder. If they're listening on the podcast, they don't know that. So let's talk a little bit about what is a savvy founder? How did this come about for you? Share with us a little bit about your own entrepreneur journey and what you enjoy doing today.
Great. So let me start with how did the savvy founder sort of come about? I was building a software in the food label regulations and went out and raised some money, built this MVP, and that endeavor, I shut that down, and I shut that down when the last administration came into the previous administration came into power, and they no longer were regulating food labels. But I was part of the ecosystem here in Southern California, at University of California, Irvine. They have a large incubator, innovation center. And I was just getting frosted and upset by watching other entrepreneurs go to investors and say, hey, what do you think to my idea? And the investor would say, come back when you have an MVP, come back when you have traction, come back when. It was a quite brush off. And it really ticked me off because what the investor should have said is, here's my investment thesis, go build your business. And when you're got that business going, give me first chance. So that really pissed me off. And at the same time, 3 people said you should do a podcast. And I said, what's that mean? And, and I was also sitting in the audience at some events, and I'm going, I know more than what the person is talking about. I should be doing that. So that's how the whole Savvy got created, seeing a miscommunication in the whole way the industry works and trying to change the way the conversation between investment and startups and how we go on the journey. In fact, my logo, it doesn't show up on the green screen. My logo is a picture of a pathway. And I say, everybody's on their own startup journey, and you don't judge your journey by somebody else's. And it's really good if you can put a little bit of guide rails on it, because it really makes it shorter. But guide rails help you, and that's what listening to other people that have gone before you will shorten your own journey.
So you've met a lot of entrepreneurs in your life, Philip. Can anyone be an entrepreneur? Can anybody launch a startup?
Absolutely. Anybody can do it. I was speaking to a doctor who, and you think of a doctor, and this was an emergency, a critical care doctor, an intensivist. And you think, I go to school. The only way I can practice my job is to go to a hospital. I'm going to be an employee for life. And guess what? He discovered telemedicine, and suddenly the hospital didn't want him starting a business in telemedicine. He quit the hospital and started a business. And at 50 years of age, he started his own business, thinking his life was going to be an employee. And so anybody can do it. And it just is an attitude of one step in front of the other. And I'm going to learn what I don't know and learn by doing.
So, on that topic, let me ask you this, and I certainly have a great deal of respect for teachers and what they do in teaching young people. A lot of my friends are teachers. One thing I still note, though, is that schools, at least in the United States, seem to teach towards becoming an employee. You got to go to college, you got to get a job, you got to, it teaches towards employees. And of course, we need employees. But there doesn't seem to be that, hey, there's an option out there. There's an entrepreneur option. And here's how to go about doing it. As we come out of COVID, and I think the opportunity to be that, not only that nomad digital, but you could actually become a nomad entrepreneur. Talk a little bit about what young people, and I'm talking, young people coming out of high school and college, what they should be aware of as far as opportunities in entrepreneurship.
Boy, you've packed a lot into that question.
How do you like that?
I think this is a short show, but let's just start with the first thing. I think is that they have such an advantage that the internet actually exists, and where they can listen to other people other than their teachers. And I'd certainly say that there's educators out there that fully understand the entrepreneurial need and the entrepreneurial mindset. There's an entire movement around the mind concept, and you can Google that. It's the entrepreneurial life skills. And so they teach that in a lot of high school entrepreneurial programs, community college programs. It's depending on where you are in the United States, it may or may not have been adopted, but it's starting to be as a life skill. But your question about the institutions of teaching is they had a lifetime of being an employee. So that's what they know. And somebody moved to cheese, and the economy moved to cheese. The world moved to cheese. It's constantly changing. And so they're trying to pass on the wisdom that they have. That's why one of the things about the Savvy founder is I always say it's great to listen to people that are a generation ahead of you. But what you really want to do is talk to people that are like 3, 4, 5 years ahead of you, because things are changing so fast. You need to know what's coming down the pipeline. Like we're dealing, we were talking about here, like, how do we deal with podcasts? How do we deal with the audio? How do we do this? Well, 10 years ago, we didn't even have to worry about that. So what entrepreneur knows about what faces of technology we're going to have tomorrow, right? So I'd advise them to get on the TikToks, the YouTubes, the Facebook lives, and listen to people that are entrepreneurial, because there is a different way to do things. Yeah.
All right. Well, there's only one way we know how to do things, or at least to pay the bills. There's only one way, and that's to take a quick break. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to take that short break to hear from our sponsors. And when we come back with our guest, Philip Topham, for our famous Plead the Fifth section of the show, we're going to ask Philip what he likes most and least about something. You and he are going to have to wait to hear about that. So don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Plead the Fifth is brought to you by our corporate sponsors: Ideal Life 360, Cornerstone Financial, First Underwriters Insurance, Kitsap Sun Newspaper, BC Fitness Studio, and the Upstart Group. Please visit our website at www.shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle to learn more about these terrific companies. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I am co-host Phil Simchich, and our guest today is Philip Topham for our next segment, Plead the Fifth.
Philip, Phil and I are going to keep asking you more questions. We might be turning up the heat a little bit, and you get to plead the fifth once in this section, but only once. So answer carefully. And again, at the end, you win absolutely nothing. So plead the fifth. What do you like most and least? Or let me put it this way. In the tech world, what do you like most about the tech world today? And what do you like the least about the tech world today?
Oh, that's actually a pretty easy question for me. What do I like the most? I love to see the Star Trek technology invented every single day, and new technology and new things that I never even dreamed of come into existence. That's fantastic. What I hate about technology is the unintended consequences I'll just leave it at that. The unintended consequences of technology are like some of the genies out of the bottle. And that's probably a discussion for another show.
So looking into your crystal ball, what trends do you see emerging in technology?
Trends in technology. So that's an interesting question, because I actually say technology is worthless without people. And the trend that I see coming out of technology and COVID is teaching us that, is it's all about people, societies, and how we connect. And so to me, technology is going to have to figure out how to morph into more humanity and more connectivity and at a basic level. And so the trends I see is definitely technology fitting into that place. And rather than technology forcing us to change, we're going to end up learning how to change technology to meet our needs.
Philip, at the beginning of the show, we talked a little bit about pressure, and a lot of times pressure comes out of fear. In starting your life as an entrepreneur and all of the things that you've experienced and done, plead the fifth. What was your biggest fear, and how did you overcome that?
Oh boy, the biggest fear that I had. I guess a fear of failure, right? We all have those demons that sit on our shoulder. On one shoulder, we have the angel that says you can do it. And then the other shoulder, you have the demon that says you're bad. And sometimes that demon that sits on your shoulder that whispers, oh man, you're going to fail. You're going to bomb. And again, back to, I think that being in the tech space at an early age, I could go fix a computer and know everything about a computer, but it could still break, right? It wasn't in my control. And so that sort of externalizing that failure for me taught me that the sun always comes up tomorrow. So failure is not, it's like failing forward. And we can talk about that more, because there's a concept of failing forward. It's good. So
speaking of failing, you've met a lot of entrepreneurs in your life. What's perhaps the most common weakness, blunder, blind spot that causes these entrepreneurs to self-inflict failure upon themselves?
Oh, the number one, confirmation bias, believing that they are the God's truth and know what they know, everything that 7 billion people don't, they know more than the other 7 billion people on the planet, and that there's nobody else knows what they know, and they're going to find the people and tell them what they know. That's the biggest blunder I see. It's crazy, but this happens all the time.
So let me ask you, this is one of the questions that we're asking all of our guests this season. And it says, what's your word, Philip, or what's your reaction, Philip, to the word impossible?
Oh, it's the name of a movie, Mission Impossible, which was making a lot of money. So, when I hear the word impossible or the word problem, I turn problem into problemtunity. Usually impossible means that's the boundary of creativity gets started. It's like putting a red flag in front of a bull. If you're a good entrepreneur and somebody says it's impossible, you can't do that. The human spirit, someone will want to say, nope, wrong, and we'll go after it. So impossible is a call to battle.
So what was the decision process or path that led you from your formal education in biological sciences into the tech world?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Great. So biology was, I thought I was good at science. I'm going to go be biology. I'm going to go do pre-med. And then I said, wow, I'm going to end up having to talk to all these people. And I am an engineer and I'm not going to talk to people. That's scary. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go play with these computers over here that don't talk back. Little did I know when I started that career that I would become totally a people person, talking to people. And I know that's I had to deal with how to learn how to deal with people complaining the computer's broke and everything else. And so absolutely, that's what happened.
Maybe it's just
go ahead, Phil.
but I find my computer actually talks back quite often, especially if I'm not doing something right. Is that unique or is that universal?
That is universal. That was an easy question. That wasn't even a truth or dare. There's the proverbial ID10T error.
Yes, I do lots of those.
And I do have a young lady who, if I say her name on my wrist, will come up and ask me what I just asked. So I won't do that, but they're talking to us there as well. So speaking of talking, Philip, you are at a dinner party, because I think we're back kind of to, at least at some places, being able to get together at a dinner party, and you've been seated at the table next to somebody that you don't know, you haven't met. How do you start an engaging, rich conversation with somebody like that? How do you start it off?
Boy, there's no one way to start it off, but there is one way to keep it going, and that is be 100% interested in the other person, totally focused, giving them your absolute focus so that they know you're interested in them. So it can be something as simple as, this is a great event. What do you think to this? And whatever the answer or whatever the question is, follow up. Well, why is it great? Or why don't you like it? And just be so interested in them. That's how you get that conversation going. And because people work with people they know, like, and trust. And the only way you can demonstrate that is you are engaged and like the other person back and give them your undivided attention and focus.
That's fascinating advice, especially for people who are addicted to these things. So what can people do to maybe just be more present with other human beings and better conversationalists, and how do they shake this little technology addiction they might have?
Yeah, so I do give some advice on that, and the advice I give is the whole wave of mindfulness that's coming about. Be aware of what you're doing, and so I tell people I have a 4-step thing. is you consume information, you digest information, you reflect, and you share it. So if we're doing is consuming something, like consuming what's on your texting or that, then you're a diet of empty calories. You're never reflecting on why you're doing it, and you're not focused on it, or binge watching on Netflix. So whatever you consume is what you eat. If you want to be a great entrepreneur, then consume entrepreneur information, but you have to reflect on what information you watched. What does it mean to you? How do you react to it? Will you think it's right? You think it's wrong? These kinds of questions back and forth strengthen a person to understand what they're doing. But then you can, eventually you get to the point where you want to share that information. That's where the savvy founder, I'm at that point where I want to share a lot. But even now, when I share information, I continue to learn from other people. It's not stopping just because I'm sharing what I've learned, because I want to reflect on what I learned from people. So that's how I look at it.
So thank you for sharing with us, and you've given us and our audience a lot to reflect on. So thank you so much for being a guest here on the Shrimp Tank today, Philip. For our listeners that want to get in touch with you and learn more about you and your company, how can they get more information?
Yeah, the best way is to go to my Linktree. So Linktree/thesavvyfounder, and all of my links, my LinkedIn, the link to the podcast, some other resources are out there. So that's the best place.
Awesome, everyone. Make sure you check out all the replays on shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle, and wherever you get your podcast from, such as iHeart, Apple, Google, Spotify, etc. Please follow us on our show's social media pages on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
Well, Philip, thank you for having joined us today. Really fun, fascinating stuff. Phil, as always, a pleasure to have you here. Everybody, do what Phil said and go to the Facebook page, like us, follow us, because that's where we live stream every Wednesday at noon Pacific time. And of course, if you can't catch us there, you can catch all the replays. Our next show will be Wednesday, May 25th. Our guest will be Marcy Glenn from Another Source. Our co-host will be Michelle Baumberger. Before then, please be safe, be well, and be prosperous, because until next week, the shrimp is back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond.